program, so that in case they felt that they own this program,
the whole community has the sense of ownership of the marine protected.
The target behavior change is generally is the empowerment.
I think that the partnership with RARE is perfect because where CCE is lacking in terms of capacity for communications and advocacy is where RARE will come in and help in terms of training and support for that.
RARE is showing a new model of making people understand that it pays to really be involved in the whole process of marine protected area management.
This strategy could really transform the people, especially with this training, the skills that this adds up to my capability.
Majority of the coastal communities in our area were requesting us, so there's a lot of demand for us to assist them.
This project and this modeling thing is something that could set the tone for the future fisheries management projects that we will be implementing at the regional level down to the local level.
We will be spreading this program not only to this municipality but the entire province.
I'm very much inspired and eager to learn here, so that when I get back there in the community, I can impart to them, and the techniques that I learned and the skills that I learned here, I could use it towards them, and so that the community's acceptance and the other communities' acceptance, the adjoining communities, I mean, would be like, yes.
Well, that was a documentary we saw, or a small one,
6 minutes of the documentary.
From the Rare Conservation,
yes.
Who is represented here by no less than their top banana.
Top fish.
Hello, Brett. Welcome
fish.
to the show Illuminati. We're so pleased.
Thank you for
and honored.
joining us, Brett.
Thanks for having me.
Brett is the CEO of Rare Conservation, which has its headquarters or main office in Washington, in Arlington. Sorry.
Arlington, Virginia, just
Arlington,
outside of
Virginia.
Washington, D.C.
Yes, and Brett is only here in the Philippines for about a few days, right?
Almost a week. Almost a week.
Almost 2 weeks, yeah.
He just flew in for us.
Okay, okay.
I just arrived on Friday, late Friday night, about Saturday morning, and at 6:30 we went out to Batangas to check out some of the reefs.
Wow, already.
3 dives over 2 days, got a lot of work done, and now we're back in the city meeting with other conservation organizations and government officials to talk about how to take Cheryl's experience and that of her 11 cohort mates to begin to talk about replicating this at additional sites throughout the country.
What else does RARE do apart from, well, I understand in the Philippines your projects have more or less concentrated themselves on coastal communities and marine protected areas, but I suppose worldwide you have other concerns,
yes,
right?
RARE is more than just that.
Well, so RARE is a global conservation organization. We are based just outside of D.C. We work with people like Cheryl, and over the last 20 years we've worked in 57 countries on 6 continents, doing basically the same thing, which is training local leaders and inspiring them to mobilize communities to adopt more sustainable practices.
Okay.
Our belief is fundamentally that human beings are the cause of every environmental problem, but we're also the solution. And really it's just a matter of finding the right source of inspiration to change your behavior. Well, it's no different from quitting smoking or wearing seat belts or reducing traffic flows or creating bicycle lanes. I can't imagine that.
Those are
on
things
the
that
street.
Kip is not familiar with.
Not bicycles. No.
But behavior change is behavior change. And so what we've really done is adopted some of the basic marketing practices of companies like Coca-Cola, where you're simply selling something to people but giving them an incentive to use it. In this case, it happens to be a critically important issue for the people who are in the audience of Cheryl's campaign.
Does RARE stand for something? Is it an acronym or
Yes,
it used
why
to be
rare?
an acronym?
Is it
Why rare?
Yeah.
We're trying to make
R-A-R-E.
rare less rare, but basically, rare was long ago an acronym, and today it's just simplified as rare. But we stand for inspiring people to care for and then to protect nature. The reason we're in the Philippines is, like many countries, where you have an incredible natural resource base and many features of the economy that are based on nature. In this case, we've been talking a lot about fishing, and you saw in the video and in discussing with Cheryl, fisheries don't exist without mangroves and without seagrass beds and without coral reefs. In fact, the entire fishing industry of the Philippines and Southeast Asia requires that all of this basic natural infrastructure is there in order to let people feed themselves. And that's the way it's always been. One of the new challenges, though, and really the new opportunity is, because fisheries have been so depleted, there is a huge opportunity for them to recover. Globally, and certainly in the case of the Philippines, fisheries have been fished down maybe 65 to 75% of their original stocks.
Wow.
So that means we've eaten 3/4 of all the available fish, and we're getting very close to crisis mode, where the crashing of fisheries would become a humanitarian crisis. It's no longer a conservation issue. The good news is there are already examples in the Philippines, in Darwin, in Apple Island, in Tubataha, and in several of the cases where Cheryl and her colleagues are working, where communities, using enlightened self-interest, have been able to set aside no-take areas, where scientists now know the biomass can grow, the number of fish grows up to 500%. That means that outside of that area, local fishermen increase their fish stocks. It's like creating a savings account, but you're deriving a very, very significant interest. If we don't do that throughout the entire developing tropics in the next 10 to 15 years, we're not only making ourselves much more vulnerable to climate change, we're actually going to reduce the food security of humanity. So these are critical issues. What I love about this program is you've got Cheryl, this charismatic, young, energetic leader, mobilizing a community using really fun marketing activities that then lead to very serious science, conservation, and fisheries reform.
Yes.
So it's positive in message, critical in scope, and it's going to work. In fact, it has to work.
Is RARE involved in other countries in our region, say Indonesia or Malaysia?
In both. In Indonesia and in Malaysia, we have a cohort of similar programs ongoing. And each of those countries is different. There are different laws, different cultures, different communities. In fact, what's so amazing about Southeast Asia is even within a country, you have so many different cultures, which is why there's no single model that RARE or any other international NGO could provide that's going to work everywhere. We have a process recognizing that at their core humans are humans, but Cheryl is adopting this approach for her community in Bohol. And so are, in fact, about 50 other conservation fellows throughout the region. And the goal is to continue to train local leaders and to mentor them as they spur a near-shore fisheries movement and then forestry conservation movement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Are you happy with the results so far of your social marketing techniques here in the Philippines?
I'm really happy, and I'll tell you why. We originally thought about the Philippines as a perhaps one piece of a global English language portfolio. And so we sent out invitations all over the world to the English-speaking developing tropics, and we said, who would like to work with us on this particular problem? We had 120 requests for support. Half of those came from the Philippines. So clearly there's a lot of demand from organizations and people who want to work with us. More importantly, now that we're a year into this first round, we have had, I believe the number is 100 different municipalities, 100 different LGUs have reached out to us to say we want to be part of the second one. So I think from a partner satisfaction standpoint, something must be going right. So yeah, I'm very pleased.
Do you find that it's been easier or more difficult for you to involve people like locals here in the Philippines compared to elsewhere?
You know, in some ways I think easier, because the Philippines was already a leader in marine conservation in many ways. One of them is, I think there are now 5,500 marine protected areas around the world. In the Philippines, there are about 1,200. So over the last 20 years, the Philippines has become specialized in developing marine protected areas. So the notion wasn't brand new. The challenge is, if they're created, but local people aren't involved, if local people don't understand the purpose, if fishermen don't perceive the benefit, then you spend all your money on enforcement and you create this conflict between people and conservationists. And that, of course, means we're all going to waste a lot of money, make a lot of enemies, and lose. Both sides end up losing. So the opportunity for the Philippines is, first, to work on these 1,200 initial marine protected areas, both those that are managed by LGUs and the national government, and begin to find ways to make sure that fishermen win. One of the new ideas that is gaining great currency throughout the world, and in fact, I flew here from Singapore, where I was at the Economist World Oceans Summit. In fact, on a panel like this with Secretary Pahe, your Minister of Environment. And in this discussion, we were talking about the opportunity to increasingly give local fishermen the rights around these no-take zones so that they are guaranteed to benefit from what we call the spillover effect. The idea is we want them to own the savings account so they derive the benefits. In some ways, that's going to be a lot cheaper than hiring boats to patrol the area to make sure we keep the fishermen out of the no-take zones.
Okay.
So there's a big opportunity in the Philippines.
But that's as against the big commercial, you know, the trawlers and everything else, the big fishermen. Yeah. Because I know
that's a great point. If you can divide the Philippines fisheries generically into two categories.
Yes.
You have your nearshore
Yeah,
small-scale
right.
fishery, and then your small pelagic fishery. Those are the
Yes.
big boats. You see the lights on the horizon
That's
in
right.
the middle of the night.
There's been a big debate about that for the last 10, 15 years, I think. Local laws, and even national laws, have been passed and been vetoed or been remanded, you know, because of the tug and pull between the commercial fishermen and the municipal fishermen.
Well, clearly, if they were voting, the local fishermen would win, because 99% of all the fishing boats in the Philippines are small-scale boats.
Yes.
And 85% of all the fishermen are small-scale fishers. And believe it or not, the small-scale fishers catch about 50% of the entire national catch. The problem is it's sort of a challenge for fisheries managers or even a conservation organization or all of the local leaders, the 800 municipal coastal presidents, to all figure out how to balance all of those competing needs. But the fact is, Philippines has to figure this out. I'm a foreigner. I simply want RARE to be in a position to help. That's our mission.
For your part, Cheryl, you did mention your actual organization, which is headed by Dr. Alan White, right?
Yes.
An expert in Philippine marine life. In fact, is the author of an important book on, I think the title is Philippine Coral Reefs. Co-written with Yasmin Arquisa, right? Isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, he had another one on Tubataha with her.
Okay.
This one he wrote on his own.
Okay. Well, how do you see your relationship, the relationship of your actual organization with RARE?
Actually, it's we're really hoping to make the relationship work, because we have a lot more sites than just Bohol, and we work in several provinces. So we're actually replicating this in our other sites, or a lot of the lessons that we're learning. And that's maybe like 50 other sites. So what I'm learning now, I'm putting into my organization.
Okay.
We actually have a department for social marketing now that's starting. So it's tough, like setting it up, but you know, this is one of the big steps that our organization is taking, to have
buy-in for our projects.
And which other stakeholders are involved? The LGUs, you've mentioned the LGUs. You really need the cooperation of the LGUs, right? What about on the national level?
Well, the Department of Natural Resources,
Okay,
DNR, clearly.
DNR,
The League of Municipal Presidents has
yes.
been a partner
Okay.
from the beginning. And then there's a host of scientific organizations. One of the principal partners is MSI,
Yes.
which is a
UP.
division of University of Philippines.
Ah,
They've been
okay.
great partners so
Yeah,
far.
right.
But we're really just getting started. As you can see, Cheryl's describing taking some of these same approaches and letting them emanate out through whole networks of other conservation
okay,
leaders.
yeah.
And that's the whole idea. I certainly can't fly in from Washington and make
Yeah.
a difference whatsoever.
But it must help that the Philippines has long had a reputation for having a very organized set of NGOs, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I've heard it said that we're the role model for some other parts of the region in terms of setting up networks, a lot of activism involved.
Absolutely.
But isn't this the kind of thing, though, that when it becomes a full success story, that means a pullout?
Well, the idea is that we don't want to be necessary. We simply want to build the capacity of a whole host of conservation organizations, local governments, maybe even help the Department of Natural Resources to the best of our ability to ensure the integration of fishers' interests and the long-term sustainability of these MPAs. Over time, perhaps the expansion of MPAs, which will boost productivity even further. And the real vision is to enable, through our partners, with our partners, a network, an unprecedented network of climate-resilient, marine protected areas throughout the entire country. Critical opportunity certainly for RARE simply to be of service in a country like the Philippines. But you're right, we're talking this week with World Wildlife Fund, with Conservation International, with Haribon, with the League of Municipal Presidents, with a whole host of institutions that probably certainly have been here before RARE and will most likely be here long after RARE. That's the idea.
As the original principles or objectives are met, right, do you evolve into new set of objectives for RARE with a specific concern for a particular area?
Yeah,
like
so
if it becomes very successful with the coral reefs, you can turn your attention elsewhere.
Well, I'll give you one example. One of the things that we're really concerned about right now throughout the developing tropics for coastal communities is, well, let's assume we're wildly successful. Let's assume 10 years down the road, we have this thing just nailed. Not RARE, all of us together. You've got productive fisheries, and you've got restored, recovered coral reefs and seagrass beds and mangroves. Let's just dream that way for a second. You've still got to worry about what's happening on land because there's sedimentation and there's erosion, and whatever is planted or cut or burned is eventually finding its way onto those reefs.
Yes.
So we're beginning to develop new kinds of strategies right now in the Pacific region where working with communities in the uplands, we can help find incentives for them to reduce the sedimentation that's flowing onto the reef. Ecology is like nuclear physics or astronomy. This is extremely complicated. It's all connected. But what we don't want to spend our time doing is working on everything. Our philosophy at RARE is keep it simple. Find something that works and scale that.
Yeah, right.
So while we're working on nearshore fisheries and MPAs, there's a group in the Andes in South America right now that working on watersheds. And what they're basically saying is communities downstream should be paying those cloud forest communities up top for them to preserve the forest in order to ensure water for their farms. And so they're trading bee boxes and barbed wire, and they're creating municipal taxes and allocations to finance their neighbors upland to do the right thing. We didn't invent it. We found one community that had figured this out, and now there are dozens of communities that are adopting the same model.
Great. It's a matter of setting or discovering or setting the precedent yourselves, right? And then having this disseminated somehow, or like what Cheryl is attempting to do with her own efforts. get a role model going, see what's working, and then have that expanded to cover other communities.
Exactly. Conservation takes great humility because we all, at the end of the day, have to
yes.
recognize this problem is bigger than all of us, and we certainly need to act like that. And so if we can work together with others to find something that doesn't matter whose brand is on it, if it has worked, we're interested in helping propagate it. Somehow that simplifies things.
I hope you don't mind, Brett, but can we go on I think we have 2 or 3 minutes left. If you can give us a little personal background on yourself. How did you get into RARE yourself? Or
I know,
did
we
you
went through the
found
whole program without even talking about
Were
it.
you a bored environmentalist, or how did it happen?
That's a really good question.
I think you were a football player initially, right?
Well,
In college.
I played a lot of football,
Yeah.
soccer, we call it, where I come from.
Oh, the real
Soccer.
football.
I'm way
Okay.
too small for
Okay.
the American football game. Played a lot of soccer growing up. In fact, the first soccer ball I ever owned was given to me by a Filipino family visiting Washington,
Aw.
D.C. when I was 6 years old. And maybe they're watching. Thank you for my first soccer ball. But I basically went to college to play sports and had
Yeah.
no intention of ever doing anything remotely like
Okay.
this. But it was when I decided to move to Costa Rica in the early
I see.
90s, just as a volunteer, to get out of the film business, which I was working in, making TV shows and films. And I fell in love with this little country and this idea that we could conserve forests, we could conserve coral reefs, and in the process, people could make money, democracy could flourish, and we could all live happily ever after. Now, it's a little more complicated than that, but I fell in love with that idea, and I really haven't done anything else ever since.
Did you help found RARE yourself?
I'd like to
assume
think
so.
that I helped rejuvenate RARE, and I'm very proud of what we've been able to do with a great leadership team and an incredible staff of highly committed people, and it builds. We're learning a lot from the Filipino community that we have hired to work for RARE here. We're learning from their experience and their culture, and I think they're learning from us, and the team's just getting stronger and stronger. You should meet these guys. You should have our whole team on here.
Yeah, an hour isn't enough, unfortunately. We're down to about 40,
yes.
30
We're
seconds.
down to a few seconds.
Yeah, I
but,
leave the
let's
last
do the
words
next
to
one
you,
in
Trex.
Bohol.
should anyone want to get involved with RARE, how can they contact you? Or
Well, I think the best thing to do would be first to go to our website, our global
Okay.
website, and it's RARE. Our actual name is RARE. Our website is rareconservation.org, or you can certainly find us through any one of our staff members in Bohol.
great. Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so
joining
much.
us, Cheryl. and
Thanks,
Brett.
Cheryl, and thanks, Brett.
And if you have any questions, suggestions, violent reactions, or if you'd like to get involved with RARE and
Cora, why don't
forget
you come
their
over and
website,
say goodbye
just
to the
email
audience?
us, illuminatispeak@gmail.com. And Cora,
Yeah.
come join us for the last frame.
Sige, so you can
And
say
we'll be back
goodbye
next week,
to...
viewers, with more art and culture topics for you. Thank you again, Brett, and
Thanks
thank
for
you,
having
Cheryl.
us.
Thanks, Cora.
To pray for the loved ones they have left behind. Heal their broken hearts, compassionate Father. Give them strength of their despair.
Embrace them with love, and may they seek solace and peace of mind.
To the victims, may your death be not in vain.